21 Mind Traps, the ultimate guide to your most common thinking errors. You might believe that you have full control over your thoughts and decisions, but how often are they actually influenced by factors you aren't consciously aware of? There are 21 cognitive traps, biases, and phenomena hardwired into the human brain that operate unnoticed in the depths of your mind. These subtle influences can persist throughout your entire life or well into adulthood without your realization, impacting your day-to-day thinking. Although you can't eliminate or disable these mental shortcuts, becoming one of the few individuals who can recognize when they manifest in your mind and understanding the situations where they are likely to affect your decision-making is a crucial first step toward becoming a more deliberate and rational thinker. We have drawn inspiration mainly from the insights of Nobel Prize-winning psychologist Daniel Kahneman and his acclaimed book, Thinking, Fast and Slow. Mind Trap 1. Cognitive Dissonance. A fox approached a vine, fixating on the luscious, purple, overripe grapes. Despite multiple attempts to reach them, the grapes remained out of reach. Frustrated, the fox leapt and landed with a thud, yet the grapes eluded him. Disgruntled, he dismissed them, saying, "I don't really care. Only grapes that aren't even ripe. Why would I want sour grapes?" He then walked back into the forest. This narrative is derived from one of Aesop's fables and is the origin of the phrase sour grapes. The fox faced three choices: either reach the grapes, admit inadequacy in obtaining them, or reinterpret the situation retrospectively, essentially creating a new conflicting belief. Opting for the third choice, where conflicting beliefs arise, exemplifies cognitive dissonance. For instance, if someone else secures a job you interviewed for, instead of acknowledging their superiority, you might convince yourself that the job wasn't desirable or the interviewer was unfair. In moments of unattainability, people often downplay their desires, claiming that what they couldn't attain was undesirable all along. When experiencing cognitive dissonance, such as believing all rich people are greedy while desiring wealth, discomfort, mental stress, and anxiety ensue. If left unaddressed, intensifying dissonance can lead to depression. The key is to recognize dissonance and make a choice, as Rolf Dobelli suggests. You can play the clever fox all you want, but you'll never get the grapes that way. Mind Trap 2. The Spotlight Effect. When you arrive 5 minutes late to the office, there's a sense that everyone is scrutinizing you. On your first day at the gym, it feels like all eyes are on you. Accidentally spilling a bit of sauce on your shirt makes you intensely embarrassed, thinking the entire party will notice. The spotlight effect is the phenomenon where individuals tend to believe that others are observing them more closely than they actually are. In reality, people are rarely as interested in you and your actions as you perceive. To alleviate unnecessary anxiety driven by the spotlight effect, it's beneficial to stop overestimating how much attention others are paying to you. Mind Trap 3. The Anchoring Effect. Whenever we find ourselves making estimations or guesses, like determining the population of Russia, we often rely on anchors. These are starting points that we know to be true, helping us navigate through unknown information. For instance, we might consider that the population is greater than 1, less than 7 billion, and smaller than China's population. While anchors are useful in exploring unfamiliar territory, they are sometimes applied unnecessarily. Consider these questions. Is the height of the tallest redwood tree more or less than 1,200 feet? What's your best guess about the height? If we presented these questions to two groups, A and B, we'd likely get different answers due to the anchoring effect. This phenomenon isn't limited to informative numbers. Even random anchors can be surprisingly effective. An experiment involving experienced German judges revealed the anchoring effect. After hearing about a shoplifting case, judges rolled loaded dice that only added up to 3 or 9. Those who rolled a 9 gave an average sentence of 8 months, while those who rolled a 3 gave an average sentence of 5 months. Similar biases were confirmed in studies using arbitrary numbers from phone or social security digits. The anchoring effect is widely exploited in sales and negotiations. For example, a car salesman might start with a high price to make a lower offer seem attractive. Setting a high-priced item in a store anchors the perception of other items as more reasonably priced. This effect is prevalent in online stores, salary negotiations, and real estate deals. While you can't deactivate this bias, you can acknowledge your vulnerability to it. Before entering sales or negotiation situations, proactively set your own mental anchors. Remind yourself not to be unduly influenced by external anchors and conduct thorough due diligence to arrive at your own conclusions. Establishing your own anchors can help you navigate these situations more effectively. Mind Trap 4. The Halo Effect. What are your thoughts on Alan and Ben? Alan is intelligent, industrious, impulsive, critical, stubborn, and envious. On the other hand, Ben is envious, stubborn, critical, impulsive, industrious, and intelligent. If you're like most people, you likely perceive Alan more favorably than Ben, even though the listed traits are identical. The halo effect, influenced by the order of information received, plays a significant role. The initial piece of information holds more weight and shapes the narrative we construct about a person or situation. For instance, Alan may be seen as stubborn and envious because of his intelligence and drive to succeed in business. In contrast, Ben's intelligence may be overshadowed by envious tendencies. The halo effect occurs when the first aspect of a person or thing influences our overall perception, outshining the complete picture. In relationships, especially during the honeymoon phase, positive thoughts create a halo effect that often blinds us to any initial negative traits. Learning that someone graduated from a prestigious university can distort our perception of their other traits without concrete evidence. Studies show that attractive people are automatically perceived as more pleasant, honest, and intelligent. In educational settings, the halo effect can affect grading, where a high grade on the first essay may subconsciously influence a higher grade on the second essay. In the workplace, the influence of early opinions, especially if the boss speaks first, can sway group decisions. Modern research supports the notion that first impressions last, as our initial judgments of someone can persist over time. To counteract the halo effect, it's crucial to move beyond initial appearances and strive to separate judgment from error. Recognize that our brains construct incomplete stories based on limited information, leading to potentially inaccurate perceptions of people or things. Examples of combating the halo effect include refraining from judging solely based on appearance, considering experience in addition to academic credentials, and gathering independent opinions before group discussions to prevent undue influence. Mind Trap 5. Gambler's Fallacy. The belief in the gambler's fallacy leads us to think that there is a need for change, a balancing force in the universe, when, in fact, no such force exists. For instance, if a coin lands on heads 3 times in a row, the subsequent toss is just as likely to be heads or tails. The fallacy arises from the mistaken idea that past outcomes influence future events, as if the coin remembers previous flips or a ball recalls where it landed. Casinos exploit the gambler's fallacy, fostering the illusion that gamblers can predict the next outcome based on some perceived balance in dice or roulette wheels. This fallacy extends beyond gambling and applies to various decision sequences. For instance, the discomfort experienced when selecting the same answer repeatedly in a multiple-choice exam is a manifestation of the gambler's fallacy. Research from the University of Chicago revealed that asylum judges were 19% less likely to approve an asylum seeker if they had just approved the previous 2 cases. Similarly, loan applicants were more likely to get approved if the 2 preceding applications were rejected, and vice versa. Baseball umpires also exhibited similar tendencies. The lesson is to scrutinize events around you, distinguishing between independent and interdependent events. Independent events are not influenced by any balancing forces of nature, debunking the misconception that past outcomes can dictate future occurrences. Mind Trap 6. The contrast effect. If you come across leather seats priced at $3,000, they might appear a bit costly. However, if you're in the process of purchasing an $80,000 car, the $3,000 upgrade for leather seats seems relatively insignificant. Studies indicate that people are willing to walk an additional 10 minutes to save $10 on food, but very few would take the same walk to save $10 on a $1,000 suit. It's common for something to appear attractive, large, or expensive when placed next to something unattractive, small, or inexpensive. Making absolute judgments can be challenging. The next time you go shopping, try to be aware of whether your purchasing decisions are being influenced by the contrast effect. Mind Trap 7. Confirmation bias. You hold a pre-existing belief, and you actively seek evidence that supports it, reinforcing the belief in an ongoing cycle. This process perpetuates, because when you encounter evidence that contradicts your belief, you tend to filter out the disconfirming information, actively forgetting it shortly afterward. This phenomenon is known as confirmation bias, the inclination to interpret new information in a way that aligns with existing theories and beliefs. Our brains are wired to uphold beliefs rather than readily accept new ones, as embracing new beliefs can be psychologically demanding. In contrast to the scientific method, which involves forming a hypothesis, gathering evidence, and testing the hypothesis, a rigorous process that may reveal uncomfortable truths, most people prefer the easier route that reinforces their positive feelings. This involves starting with a theory or belief, turning to sources like Google, selectively seeking information that confirms the belief, and disregarding contradictory evidence. Unfortunately, major platforms now customize content based on personal interests and browsing history, intensifying confirmation bias on a large scale. People find themselves in communities of like-minded individuals, known as echo chambers, which further fortify their convictions and amplify confirmation bias. The more one conforms facts to fit their beliefs, the more limited their perspective becomes, eventually forming a narrow reality. Confirmation bias gives rise to an I'm always correct ego, especially evident in political discourse, where opposing perspectives become increasingly narrow and discourse about differently interpreted facts becomes nearly impossible. According to Daniel Kahneman, frequent repetition is a reliable method to make people believe in falsehoods, as familiarity can be indistinguishable from truth. Echo chambers facilitate this repetition and dissemination of ideas, stifling divergent thinking and opinions. While it is challenging to eliminate confirmation bias entirely, there are ways to mitigate its impact. The first step is acknowledging the existence of this mental trap. If time allows for reflection, strive to think gray, recognizing the shades of complexity in situations. To become an independent thinker, explore the gray areas. Avoid being influenced solely by repeated ideas, and seek information from diverse sources. The objective facts often lie somewhere in the middle, in the gray area beyond the narrowed perspective of confirmation bias. Mind Trap 8. The Bader-Meinhof phenomenon. When you purchase a specific brand of car, suddenly you start noticing that particular car everywhere, even though you didn't before. Similarly, when you learn a new word or concept, it seems to appear frequently in your life, and you wonder why you never noticed it before. The Bader-Meinhof phenomenon is an illusion wherein, after initially observing something, there is a tendency to notice it more frequently. This heightened awareness creates the false impression that the thing is appearing more often than it did before. This phenomenon is influenced by two additional biases: the recency effect, which amplifies the significance of recent stimuli, and confirmation bias, which reinforces the idea that these apparent coincidences must have some meaning, perpetuating your search for confirmation. Essentially, our brains are adept pattern recognition systems that constantly seek meaning in data. Remarkably, there are numerous patterns and stimuli bombarding you every day that your brain simply ignores because they are not within your current awareness. We tend to see only the things we are actively looking out for. In reality, you may have encountered that word or car multiple times before, but your mind simply wasn't interested in noticing it at the time. Mind Trap 9. Zeigarnik effect. We tend to remember incomplete tasks much more easily than completed ones. In simpler terms, unfinished tasks linger in our memory longer than those that are finished. Initially, it was believed that the only way to counteract the Zeigarnik effect, which causes thoughts to be persistently occupied by incomplete tasks, was to finish those tasks. However, further research into the Zeigarnik effect revealed that merely having or writing down a plan to complete the task was sufficient to halt the effect. So, if you find yourself awake at night, feeling stressed about incomplete tasks, grab a pen and pad. Write down a quick plan to tackle and complete the job. Transferring the tasks from your mind onto paper effectively combats the Zeigarnik effect and provides you with greater peace of mind. Mind Trap 10. The paradox of choice. 2 experiments were conducted at a supermarket to explore the paradox of choice. In the first experiment, there were 24 different types of jam available for customers to sample and purchase at a discounted rate. In the second experiment, only 6 different types of jam were offered for free testing and purchase at a discounted price. The results showed that the first experiment attracted 60% of shoppers, with only 3% making a purchase. Conversely, the second experiment, despite attracting only 40% of shoppers, saw a 30% jam purchase rate. The paradox here lies in the fact that although a larger variety initially attracts more shoppers, a smaller selection led to a tenfold increase in jam sales. This paradox of choice suggests that while many people view a wide selection of products as a positive, there is a threshold beyond which an extensive range becomes overwhelming. This overwhelming choice can result in inner paralysis and decision fatigue. The same paradox can be observed in modern-day dating. While one might assume that having a multitude of options would make it easier to find the perfect partner, research suggests that more optimal decisions are often made when presented with a smaller set of choices. When faced with a limited number of options, individuals can easily evaluate the pros and cons of each and tend to be more content with their chosen option. However, an abundance of choices complicates decision-making, making it challenging to identify the best option. The greater the number of options, the higher the likelihood of experiencing regret. Comparing numerous alternatives diminishes satisfaction with the final choice. Even when a person makes an excellent decision, the opportunity costs associated with the unchosen options can detract from overall satisfaction. Moreover, an excess of choices sometimes leads people to avoid making any decision altogether, resulting in abandonment of the endeavor. Mind Trap 11. Survivorship bias. During World War II, Navy researchers undertook a study on aircraft damage from enemy fire upon return from missions. They concluded that armor must be added to the most damaged areas. Initially appearing as the most reasonable course of action, we need to place more armor where the planes are getting hit most. However, mathematician Abraham Wald promptly highlighted an error made by the researchers. They exclusively analyzed data from surviving planes, completely overlooking the bombers that were shot down. Wald suggested a reversal, advocating for armor in areas untouched on surviving planes, as these areas caused fatal damage to other bombers that did not survive. Survivorship bias, a logical error, arises when the presented data only represents a subset of the population that survived some filtering process. Simply put, we tend to focus on things that survived and overlook those that failed. People may make statements like they made much stronger and more beautiful buildings in this time and age, ignoring that this is one of the only buildings to survive, and 99% of buildings from that era were likely flimsy and ugly, now invisible to us. Another example, moving to a new town, seeing many successful restaurants, and concluding you can do the same. What remains invisible are the failed restaurants from prior years. Focusing only on winners due to survivorship bias leads to underestimating challenges and overestimating success chances. Everywhere you look, there are successful actors and actresses. In reality, the chances of success are a fraction above zero. But no one is interested in the failures, making the graveyard of failures largely invisible. Society and media concentrate on winners. Searching for actors that never made it or people who failed in life after dropping out of college yields little useful information. For every rock star, there are thousands in the cemetery of failure who never made it. For every startup business, there are thousands of failed startups. While everyone should chase their dreams, beware of survivorship bias misleading you into thinking the challenge is easier than it seems. Be cautious of overly optimistic beliefs fueled by invisible failures. Are you solely focusing on the person or thing that survived a process? Mind Trap 12. Self-serving bias. You earned an A on the test through your diligent effort. Conversely, if you failed a test, it's because the teacher is unjust and harbors dislike for you. The CEO attributes all the company's positive developments in the year to his/her astute decisions. However, if the company experiences a downturn, it's attributed to external factors such as the economy, interest rates, and government policies. As per the self-serving bias, we tend to attribute our failures to external forces while crediting our successes to internal actions. Typically, when faced with a negative outcome, most people instinctively seek excuses and blame others. To counteract this tendency, the initial step is to recognize the bias. Cultivate humility and consistently solicit feedback from others to hold yourself accountable for both strengths and weaknesses. Mind Trap 13. Self-serving bias is also closely linked to fundamental attribution error. We tend to assess others' actions based on their personality or inherent character traits, while we ascribe our own behaviors to situational factors. For instance, if Simon arrives late to work, it's often perceived as a reflection of his laziness and lack of commitment to the job. Conversely, if we find ourselves running late, we attribute it to external factors such as traffic or weather. It's important to be mindful of these tendencies and recognize situations where we judge someone else's personality in a manner that, in a similar context, we would attribute to external factors. Mind trap 14. Hindsight bias. You've likely come across individuals who consistently say, "I knew that was going to happen," or "I knew that stock was going to fall," or "I knew she was going to lose the election," or "I knew Jack and Mary were going to break up." These individuals suddenly become experts after an event has unfolded. This phenomenon is known as hindsight bias, or the "I told you so" phenomenon. When reflecting on past events, everything appears clear and inevitable. Consider yourself as a computer with a virus, the hindsight bias, that overwrites past information, preventing the reconstruction of previous states of knowledge. Despite thinking our memories are clear, in reality, we struggle to remember the past accurately. Hindsight bias distorts memories of what was actually said or believed before an event, aligning past opinions or beliefs more closely with the actual outcome. For instance, before an election, you may hold a certain belief. However, the observed results update in your brain, and the virus distorts your memory, always favoring your viewpoint. This leads to misremembering things said, past opinions, and overconfidence in explaining the reasons behind an outcome. The events leading up to World War II probably appeared more uncertain on the ground, but with hindsight, people arranged them neatly into a sequence that suggests predictability. Hindsight bias is particularly detrimental to decision-makers, doctors, coaches, CEOs, and financial advisors because observers judge individuals based on the outcome rather than the soundness of their decision-making. Good decision-making that results in a bad outcome is blamed, while bad decision-making with a good outcome is praised. This oversimplification of the past ignores the doubt, uncertainty, or complexity that existed at the time. In reassuring someone who made a mistake, it's essential to acknowledge that the error may seem obvious in hindsight, but at the time, one could not have known in advance. Statements like "I knew this exact thing was going to happen" should be met with skepticism, as memory distortions may have occurred. Mind trap 15. Availability bias. Cape Town is considered safe. I know someone who resides there and has never encountered any issues with crime. Smoking isn't as harmful. My uncle has been a smoker for 50 years, and he is still alive. Humans exhibit a consistent tendency to think poorly in terms of statistics, even when educated. We construct a perception of the world based on readily available examples, which is inherently illogical and diverges from reality. Statements like these, aimed at proving a point, actually offer no substantial proof. They are indicative of succumbing to the availability bias. Occurrences like plane crashes make a lasting impression, while safe flights easily fade from memory. This availability bias can contribute to an irrational fear of flying. Similarly, a recent news story about a shark attack is easy to recall, while safe swims in the ocean are easily forgotten, leading to an irrational fear of shark attacks. Our estimation of the likelihood of an event is often influenced by the information most readily available in our memory, such as recent news or extreme events. For example, despite the factual odds of a shark attack in Australia being around 1 in 1 million, proximity to information about recent attacks can inflate our perceived risk. As we encounter information, such as a news story about a shark attack in an unfamiliar part of Australia, or a personal connection to a shark attack, our perceived risk increases. The availability of information, even if emotionally charged or geographically close, can distort our risk assessments. This availability bias leads to an inaccurate mental map of risks, causing us to overestimate the likelihood of events like airplane crashes, car accidents, or terrorist attacks, while underestimating the risks associated with diseases like cancer or diabetes. Mind trap 16. Availability cascade. A local news report about a razor blade found in candy sparks concern among mothers in the community. This concern prompts another news story about the worried mothers, eventually reaching a national level. Parents, influenced by the news, start inspecting their children's Halloween candy, leading to a nationwide trend of avoiding homemade treats for trick-or-treaters. This sequence of events illustrates an availability cascade, a self-sustaining chain triggered by media reports of a minor incident, escalating to widespread public panic or significant government intervention. The adoption of a belief occurs not necessarily because it is true or prevalent, but because it becomes popular. In simpler terms, an availability cascade represents an excessive reaction to a minor issue. When faced with minor risks, people tend to either entirely ignore them or greatly exaggerate them, without finding a middle ground. For example, a parent waiting up for their teenage child may be aware that there is a 99% chance everything is fine. However, even a small thought that something might be wrong can set off a cascade of thoughts, leading to growing concerns about a potential disaster. This, in turn, may lead to panic and the immediate need to contact and ensure the child's safety. When watching the news, one should question whether it is an objective piece of journalism or just an availability cascade. As succinctly put, this is merely an availability cascade, a non-event inflated by the media, until it dominates our screens and triggers public outcry. Mind Trap 17. Sunk cost fallacy. You and your friend go to the cinema, and after 25 minutes, both of you realize the movie is terrible. Turning to your friend, you suggest leaving, stating, "This is terrible. Let's get out of here." However, he responds, "Yeah, it is, but we spent a lot on these tickets. We can't just leave now." This scenario exemplifies the sunk cost fallacy. Regardless of whether you stay or leave, the money has already been spent. Another example could be having a continuously unfaithful girlfriend, but despite the circumstances, you may convince yourself not to give up on the relationship, saying things like, "I've invested so much time, energy, and love into this woman. I can't give up on her now." If you find yourself uttering phrases such as "I've come so far," or "I spent so much on this stock, I can't sell it now when the stock price is declining," you are likely experiencing the sunk cost fallacy. This fallacy can significantly impact decision-making, particularly in the context of investing in the stock market. To make more rational decisions, it is crucial to assess the current status and future outlook of the stock or relationship, without assigning undue weight to past investments of money, time, energy, or love. Mind Trap 18. The framing effect. Which type of meat would you prefer to purchase? 99% fat-free or 1% fat? When presented with these options, most individuals choose option AI, even though the two options are identical. Now, consider this: 98% fat-free or 1% fat? Surprisingly, a majority still opt for option A. This phenomenon is known as the framing effect, where the presentation of information influences our conclusions, even when the underlying facts remain the same. It's essential to be vigilant about how news outlets frame their headlines and stories, as well as how companies present their offers. For example, when given the choice between a small popcorn for $3 and a large popcorn for $7, many people lean towards the cheaper alternative. However, when a third option, a medium size for $6.50, is introduced, studies show that a significantly higher percentage choose the large, perceiving it as the most valuable option, even though the small and large prices are exactly the same. The introduction of a decoy option can change perceptions and influence decision-making towards a more expensive choice. The impact of framing is evident in various scenarios, such as when The Economist magazine offered readers 2 subscription options, and most chose the cheaper one. However, when a third decoy option was introduced, sales increased by 43%, even though the offer remained the same. The framing of the options made the print and web offer appear more valuable. Similarly, the way we present choices can affect decisions. For instance, when asking someone to pay overdue bills, the manner in which the request is framed matters. Likewise, offering a cash discount of 5% versus a credit card surcharge of 5% may evoke different responses, even though the financial outcome is the same. Consider a medical scenario where the likelihood of survival is presented as either a 90% chance of survival or a 10% chance of dying. Despite the outcome being identical, the different frames of these probabilities influence the emotions attached to decision-making. In essence, the words we use impact the emotions guiding our choices. Mind Trap 19. The clustering illusion. Have you ever perceived faces in the clouds, identified images like Jesus on toast, or recognized faces in the rock formations of Mars? The human brain naturally seeks patterns and adheres to rules. While the clustering illusion is mostly harmless, it holds real-world implications. Investors who heavily rely on technical analysis when examining charts often exhibit a remarkable ability to discern various patterns and make predictions based on the data. They may sense patterns that lead to risky investments, even when no real patterns exist. Consider this string of X's and O's. Is the sequence random or planned? Despite being entirely random, individuals, when asked, frequently come up with various laws or rules to explain the pattern of letters. To counteract your inclination towards pattern recognition, it is beneficial to regain your skepticism. When identifying a pattern, question whether it is more likely to be a product of pure chance or if you are falling prey to the clustering illusion. Mind Trap 20. Exponential growth. If you were to fold a piece of paper in half and then repeat this process 50 times, you might guess it would end up a few inches thick, but in reality, it could reach a thickness nearly reaching the sun from Earth. Linear growth is easily grasped by us, but the concept of exponential growth is challenging, primarily because our ancestors primarily had linear experiences and never needed to understand exponential growth. Consider a hypothetical country with a 5% inflation rate. Intuitively, many might struggle to comprehend the impact of only 5%. However, if I inform you that in 14 years, your money will be worth half of its current value, the implications become more understandable and potentially worrisome. The greatest shortcoming of the human race is our inability to understand the exponential function. Al Bartlett. The power of compounding is the most powerful force in the universe. Albert Einstein. To demonstrate the power of exponential growth, imagine placing 1 grain of rice on the first square of a chessboard, 2 on the second square, 4 on the third, and so forth, doubling the grains on each subsequent square. The astonishing result, you would need 18 quintillion grains of rice to complete this task, highlighting how quickly a small amount can grow exponentially. For a more intuitive approximation of the time it takes for a process to double, use the rule of 70. For instance, with 10% returns on investment, your money will double in approximately 7 years. An 8% inflation rate means your money will halve in value in about 8.7 years. With a country experiencing 5% population growth, the population will double in approximately 14 years. While these rates need to remain constant, and the real world is full of uncertainties and complexities, expressing growth in this way is often more intuitive than stating the current inflation rate is X%. Exercising caution with exponential growth is crucial. Never entirely trust your intuition about exponential growth, as it is inherently challenging to comprehend. Whenever possible, attempt to convert the growth rate into a more linear representation with a specific time frame. Mind Trap 21. Barnum Effect. You might be surprised to learn that I know you. You have a strong desire for others to like and admire you. There are moments when you question the correctness of your decisions. You take pride in being an independent thinker. Your personality tends to be versatile, ranging from being outgoing, friendly, and sociable to being introverted, cautious, and reserved. How accurate was my description of your personality? In 1948, Bertram Fourier conducted an experiment where individuals were provided with the same set of generalized statements commonly found in astrology magazines. He then informed each participant that he had personally crafted the statements specifically for them. Astonishingly, 86% of participants believed that the text accurately described their personality. This phenomenon is known as the Barnum effect, wherein individuals readily ascribe their personalities to vague and generalized statements, even if these statements could apply to a broad spectrum of people. So, the next time you exclaim, "Oh my gosh, that is so me!" while reading your horoscope or taking an online quiz to determine your spirit animal, bear in mind that people are often easily deceived by horoscopes, palm reading, and psychics due to the influence of the Barnum effect. Thanks for watching.